Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. We do have some visitors from the States at times. So good afternoon or good evening to you, and welcome to this, actually our first meeting of the Anti-Racism Allies Network, formerly known as the White Allies Network. And I'll say a little bit more about that change of name shortly. But welcome everybody, and particularly warm welcome to our panel, Jaz Kaur, Shadi Hussain and Vinay Palmer. Really good to have you with us. We're going to introduce them a little bit later in a bit more detail. But just to say that we do record these sessions, but at the same time, we blur out anyone's faces that aren't panel members during discussion times. And also, if you say anything during the session which you prefer not to be on the recording, then I'm the editor and I can edit those out. Just let me know if that's a concern for you. But I'm delighted that we are in our fifth part of our Hidden Racism series this evening. Of course, we need to acknowledge that when we talk about hidden racism, it's not hidden to the people that are on the receiving end of it. But we are focusing in this series on areas which get less press and less publicity, perhaps less well understood. So this is the fifth part. We've looked at microaggressions. We've looked at the East and Southeast Asian heritage experience. We've looked at mixed heritage experience. And the last one in October was on rural racism. So we're delighted to be able to focus this evening on the South Asian heritage experience. Just to give you an indication of our agenda for this evening. So we're going to mention this name change in just a moment and explain what that's been about. A reminder of our purpose, which remains the same. We'll talk about the qualities of our spaces as well, which are like the ground rules that we would like you to agree to, so that we have some good, respectful and informative conversations this evening. I then, as I always do, just touch on race and racism in the news since our last session, which was in October. So my goodness, there's been a lot going on. So I'll touch on that before we move on to our main event, which is to look at the South Asian heritage experience. And we're going to be asking Jaz, Shadi and Vinay to share from their personal experience, as well as some of their work sector experience and expertise as well. I'll be asking about 3 to 4 questions during that time, and then it'll be open to a Q&A from everyone here. We deliberately use the meeting format of Zoom so that people can show their faces and ask questions in person. So it's a bit more of a sense of dialogue rather than a seminar or webinar. So we'll have a whole group Q&A and discussion. I'll then round off the evening just before 9:30 to explaining what's next in 2026, the next sessions we have planned. And then if you can stick around after 9:30, we'll turn the recording off then, but if you can stick around for a chat, often people have some really, I don't know, really engaging conversations between 9:30 and about 9:50 before I bring things to a close. So that's the agenda for this evening. So a bit about our name. What's in a name? Well, when we started the White Allies Network in 2021, we called it White Allies Network because we wanted to express that it's actually white people taking some responsibility to be better allies against racism. Over time, though, the inclusion of the word white in our titles had started to become a bit of a challenge because some people were feeling, well, maybe it's not for me then because I'm not white. We also had somebody from America saying, at last, someone's sticking up for white people in America, and so they joined on that basis. I had to explain we're not quite, that's not quite the idea. So we got our steering group and our council of reference together in November. We meet once a year to talk about the year that's gone and the year to come. By the way, our council of reference is who we look to really to hold us accountable, to make sure we don't get above ourselves into kind of a white savior space, but also just to challenge us to in terms of our focus as a network, keeping that true. True to that aspiration to be the best allies we possibly can be against racism. Anyway, we had about 6 names, I think, in the hat that we put to the steering group and council of reference, had a vote on that, had a pretty much agreement really on the one that we would choose, and that is the Anti-Racism Allies Network. And in case you're wondering why in the web address we haven't got the hyphen in the right place, We tried it in that place, but it looks like anti-racy smallies, which sounds like we're against skimpy underwear, I think, which is not really what we're about. I mean, up to you. It's not a membership requirement, but that's not really our focus for this network. But what is our focus? Let's look at our aims, which remain the same as when we were White Allies Network, or AARON, as we call ourselves in brief now, Anti-Racism Allies Network. It aims to help us to become true allies of people of colour, the global majority in the fight against systemic and global injustice. And for those of us racialized as white, AARON also aims to help us to learn about ourselves, our histories, our privileges, and our impact in the world, to learn about people of colour, their histories, perspectives, and experiences, and to develop ideas for action that we can take individually, collectively, and in partnership with others towards racial justice. We determine not to be just a talking shop. We want to turn our education of ourselves and our understanding into action as much as we can. And just to emphasize, everyone is welcome at our meetings. You don't have to join as a member, but if you do, we can keep you informed more regularly on what we are doing and the speakers coming up. And you can join as an aspiring White Ally member or a co-mentor, a person of colour who can journey with us as we seek to be better allies against racism. So that's our aims. The qualities of our spaces, or the ground rules that we would like you to agree to, we've agreed as a network previously on these, is that we commit to be respectful and non-judgmental, being slow to make negative judgments, being aware of the intersectionality of people's experiences. We want to be humble and curious, allowed to own our ignorance, able to say sorry authentically when we unintentionally offend, but also being curious about views very different to our own, pausing before responding, particularly if we feel triggered. We want to be mindful and heartful, careful, thinking before we speak, considerate in our contributions and language, emotional and empathetic, not rationalizing away each other's feelings, able to express our own feelings. Also to be open and authentic, personal, able to speak our own truth, sharing our own experiences and perspectives, as well as courageous, open to challenge and to be challenged, the courage to confront ourselves and others. And confidential, so that what is shared is kept confidential to the context in which it is shared. That's particularly so when we have small breakout groups. But as I said, if there's anything that you say today that you prefer not to be in the recording, then let me know, and I would exclude that from the published recording on our website. And finally, we want to be kind and other-centered, sensitive to each other's needs, building relationships first, and recognizing that some people need more time and space than others to be able to contribute. We also don't want to get into wallowing in white guilt. Guilt can be helpful as long as it spurs us to action, but we don't want to wallow in that. We recognize that becoming anti-racist isn't about centering us and our guilt, defending our ego, but about serving a greater cause. So those are the qualities of our spaces, the ground rules, if you like, for our meeting tonight. If you don't feel you can sign up to those, then it might be best you do something else, watching TV or watching Crystal Palace, hopefully get into Europe in the next phase. But anyway, that's what we expect. And if we feel that anyone's violating those principles, then you may be excluded against your will. So that's just a warning. So, race and racism in the news. Let me just give you a few highlights, lowlights, really, to be honest with you. Gosh, there's been so much since last October. Quite a lot centered around this gentleman, I'm afraid. 11th of December, he again sparked controversy with sharp personal remarks about Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar at a rally in Pennsylvania when he also called Somalia filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime. And last week, so it's not last week now, it was back then, he described Somalians as garbage. Doesn't get any better, does it? And of course, the ICE brutality against immigrant populations too has been an ongoing news item. Now, you may well have heard of the two white allies that died but something that one of our Council of Reference pointed out to me just recently is that has anyone heard of the 7 people of colour who have died in these circumstances at the hands of ICE brutality? In case you haven't, and I hadn't, I want to just name them actually here. And this came from this post by Quassim Rashid. It says, much love to Alex Pretty and Renee Good, but remember, ICE has killed 9 people. You know the names of the 2 white people they've killed. They've also killed a black man named Keith Porter, a Cambodian named Parody La, and 5 Latinos named Heber Sanchez Dominguez, Victor Manuel Diaz, Luis Beltran Yanes Cruz, Luis Gustavo Nunez Caceres, and Geraldo Lunas Campos. My apologies to any Spanish speakers there if I've pronounced those names wrong, but I just wanted to put them out there and name them so they won't be forgotten. But our press doesn't always give us the whole picture, does it? And that's always worth remembering. Football has been in the news, has it not, in terms of racism too? And in Real Madrid's Champions League tie against Benfica, it was halted for 10 minutes after Vinicius Junior reported alleged racist abuse by Benfica winger Gianluca Prestiani. He denied the claims following the match, and his manager Jose Mourinho pointed to the club's legendary striker Eusebio as proof that Benfica is not a racist club. Well, there you go. I think he probably dug a deeper hole there by saying that, but never mind. And in the UK too, we've had 4 Premier League footballers report racism just since that event, from Burnley, Chelsea, Wolves, and Sunderland, and also 2 Scottish players too reported that. And Police Scotland said it was also the UK Football Policing Unit told Radio 5 Live that the police unit has seen an increase of about 115% in racist incidents in the last I think it's 6 months or so. And last night, Vinicius actually scored the winning goal in the follow-up tie, and there was at least some allies in the crowd there saying no to racism, although Real Madrid fan still managed a Nazi salute. So this is an ongoing issue, isn't it? Which is not going away, unfortunately. But what I'd like to do is just to finish this this part is just to acknowledge this great man, Jesse Jackson, who died on the 7th of February, aged 84. Been active as a civil rights campaigner since 1960. He was with Martin Luther King in that Selma march, and also with him on the balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, when he was assassinated. He became a Baptist minister in 1968 and ran for president in 1983. And throughout and right up until his 80s, he has been campaigning against racial injustice and showing up at protests against police brutality and calling for justice for victims of shootings. So rest in peace, Jesse Jackson. I think there's a life well lived and well served. Not a flawless character, as none of us are, and yet such a powerful voice for justice over the last 50, 60 years plus. Okay, so that's racism in the news, and so now I'm delighted to turn to our main event, as it were, and just to introduce our panel briefly, and I'll get them to say a bit more about themselves as well. But Jaz Kaur is Associate Director of Equality, Diversity, Inclusion and Organisational Development at Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Trust, where she works to address workforce and health inequalities and to connect staff experience directly with access, experience and outcomes for service users. And I've been delighted to have the privilege of working with Jaz's team over the last year of setting up an Allies network within, or at least reinforcing the Allies network that was there within the trust. So welcome, Jaz. And Shelley, as Director of Global Learning Consultancy, she's been a colleague of mine for the last 15 years or so. I've had the privilege of designing and co-facilitating with her an award-winning Leadership 2025 program, which was designed to increase the ethnic diversity of leadership within the housing sector. And more recently, delighted that Shelley's been able to join me in the Deeper Leaders Collective. Her advice, wisdom, and facilitation on all things organizational development is much sought worldwide. And so we're very much privileged to have her here this evening. And Vinay Palmer is a UK-based keynote speaker, storyteller, and managing director of Customer Whisperers, a consultancy that helps organizations build loyalty and trust through the moments that shape how people feel. And I was delighted to get to know Vinay as a client during his time at National Express, and equally delighted when he left to spend more time doing what he does so well as a much sought after speaker on the subject of customer experience. So welcome, all three of you. So I'm going to launch straight into that first question and just ask you one at a time, really, to tell something about yourselves, introduce yourselves, something about your story, and if you can start with your first experiences of racism personally, that would be helpful too. So, Jazz, can we start with you?
Oh, Adrian, I thought long and hard when you posed this question, and I was thinking actually the first time of racism, and then I started gaslighting myself, if I'm being really honest. I was like, was it
Um,
racism? Was it just something,
Gosh.
something quite kind of normal around then? So I come from a family where I'm Jessica, my brother's Tommy, my sister's Sharon, my other brother's James, my mum and my dad are Bobby and Gary, and my brother and sisters have actually taken those names as birth certificate names.
Mm,
Um, so the first experience of racism came as a 5-year-old child going into, um, well, I was about 4 actually, going into nursery. And my name is actually Jas Kiran. It's an Indian Irish name, um, primarily because my dad had a lot of Irish friends at the time. They thought it was quite funny to have my name as a Kian rather than a Kiran, which is a traditional Punjabi name for anybody that knows. So I'm Jas Kian, and I wasn't known as Jas Kiran or Kian until probably about 19 years old, if I'm being really honest. So I was always Jessica.
mm,
Sometimes Jessica Rabbit, sometimes Jess if they wanted to shorten it. But Jas Kiran was too long, it was too complicated, it took too many words, and nobody could pronounce it in a little town in Derby. Um, which I didn't think it would trigger me, but I was like, oh my goodness, it really has triggered me.
mm,
So that was on a backdrop of a dad who had changed his name from Gurbakhsh to Gary, a mother who had changed the name from Avdar to Bobby. Um, Dad, if you put a frontal kind of screen in front of him, he speaks like everybody else in Derby. Mum still speaks Pidgin Punjabi and Pidgin English, depending on which one you're kind of scoping with her.
mm,
But from a very early age, I was taught to adapt, to code switch, to fit in, not to make any noise, keep it as quiet as possible, and do well. So you're always achieving, no matter what you're doing it to the best of your ability, and you're doing it fast, and you're doing it hard, and you're going to do that with little noise. And I thought long and hard, actually, is that racism or is it something else? And then I started reading into colonialism and the infighting around colonialism and kind of divide and conquer. And then I thought, actually, I don't want to read this anymore. It's making me a bit sad and depressed. There's some parts of me that I've learnt to treasure and formulate as part of my identity. Um, what the question did make me realize, a lot of them are tainted by racism,
mm,
and how to turn that into a positive rather than a deficit approach is something that I've worked significantly on
mm,
across particularly the last 15 years of my life, whereby everything it means to be a stereotypical Asian woman has fought against me in my life, whether it be because I'm outspoken, whether it be because I'm perceived to be confident, whether it be because I stand my ground. When you read into it, these are perceptions painted by Western cultures, but actually within Punjabi cultures or wider Asian cultures, particularly within India, Women are the pinnacle of the households. They are strong. They are centered. They are where the history lies. They are the place that men and women are born. They are they are the start and they are the end. So it started to raise some questions for me. Um, as to actually, yeah, how much has this painted me in terms of racism, and how can I really use the platforms that I have in enabling a asset-based conversation versus a deficit? And that is something that has been ingrained in me from day dot. So being identified as Jessica was never thought of as a bad thing.
Mm.
My dad was like, oh, it's a really nice name. Look at Jessica Rabbit. Look at all those people out there called Jessica. It was always made out to be a positive thing. And I think that's something about growing up in a particularly a Punjabi Asian household, whereby you make the best of it. And actually, I do raise the question to my dad even now sometimes. I was like, why did you ever come here? It's freezing. We've got land over there in Punjab. It's hot, it's warm, you get fresh fruit. We have 3 weeks old oranges over here. Why, Dad? And he's like, look at what you've got here and look at what you've been able to do. And for whatever the country has bought, it's also supported us in our development. And that is, it's not a point of gratefulness, it's a point of fact, and a point of experience in terms of staying humble, staying real, not to downplay the racism that my kids even experience walking down the street in terms of the P word being used against them, even today,
Mm.
or my dad being called a ragged who wears a turban. These are all real life factors that have shaped not only my world, but the world of my family.
Mm.
And it feels like it becomes part of your existence.
Mm.
And what we haven't been able to engineer enough is the ability to actually talk about it in some of our households. And that's where I feel it becomes a challenge for us, particularly in our future generations, um, whereby it's ignored or it's brushed under the carpet. It's not considered a factor. So that's my experience of racism.
Mm. Thanks, Jazz. Appreciate that. Shirley, can I ask you to go next? You're muted still at the moment.
Thank you. That's to avoid you all hearing me cough away. Anyway, Shelley, and Shelley is my name. Many of us from that part of the world have what's known as a formal name or an informal name or a nickname. So Shelley is my nickname given to me by my parents. So we've not anglicized it in that sense. But obviously there's clearly anglicized influence from wherever they got it, because Shelley is not a common Bangladeshi name, you know. Tulip might be, but Shelley isn't, you know. And my real name is Afroza, my real name being my formal name, and that's on legal documents, which is often the way it happens in Bangladesh. So we just continued that tradition. But in terms of my experience, I am first generation. Lots of people think I'm second generation. I was born in what is now Pakistan, but I come from, in terms of family heritage, from Bangladesh, which was at that time East Pakistan. And because of all of that movement, we just see ourselves as my family as one community with Pakistani friends, Indian friends, East Pakistani or Bangladeshi, Bengali friends, etc. I say that because that speaks to the mindset I come from. We are one peoples of the earth, you know. So this sort of political hassle that's gone on since the British left is there. It's impactful, but there's something in our hearts that says we are one people. My early experiences at the age of 6 were typical things that I think many people who look like me have experienced. The P word non-stop P word. I didn't speak English when I came, so that became a challenge because then I was classified as kind of stupid, didn't understand English, didn't write English, couldn't do my math. So I'm not good at maths now, but at that time I was quite good at maths. I just didn't know my English numbers, etc. So the P word, Shelley, is smelly. And when I understood what smelly meant, I was a bit aghast because my family still kept the tradition of you bathe in the morning and you bathe before you eat God's food. So I must have been the cleanest person in the school because I bathed every morning, and bathing wasn't just washing your body, it was full-blown hair and everything, So it's like, how can I be smelly? I've literally just washed, etc. And of course, I now realize it's got nothing to do with me being smelly. It was, this association of dark skin being dirty and therefore smelly, etc. And also, my parents never spoke directly to me about racism until I was 16, and I'll tell you that story in a moment, or 14. But there were always whispers within whispered conversations. My parents were both medics, and I can remember coming home once and my father coming back looking very, very distressed. And he went into the kitchen and spoke to my mother, and I happened to overhear it, not understanding everything at that moment, but I understood it later, which was he'd basically come back. He was a senior registrar in his field, and he basically came back because he'd overheard a conversation. His first name is Amjad. He's died now, but his first name is Amjad. Overhearing a conversation saying, Amjad will never become a consultant because he is an FP. Okay. And I didn't understand it at that age. I must have been 9, but those words have never left me. And I think inside me, that is what has driven me to do anti-oppression work. It wasn't my personal experience, but the pain of someone who worked so blooming hard to come across as an immigrant professional when this country was calling out for professionals of all natures, shoemakers, carpenters, nurses, doctors, engineers, bus drivers, whatever, all the different professions that any country needs. And then when at the time they spoke, my father, he dropped me off at a new school. We'd moved from Wales to London, and I was about to start my O-levels or GCSEs, and he dropped me in front of the school, and he'd never spoken directly about racism. And he said, whatever you do, you remember you will have to work 3 times as hard as everybody else. That's just how it goes. And in a way, I knew exactly what he was talking about. It was an unspoken understanding that you have to work hard, get qualifications, your skin color or your gender or your religion is not going to help you around here. So, you'll have pockets of people who are beyond awesome, beautiful, supportive, but there's a large societal impact that isn't that way. So I felt aggrieved in a way. And then I also, in my teenage irritation, I thought, oh God, he's telling me to do physics, chemistry and biology, which he was, by the way. It's like, they're the tough subjects. You've got to get through that lot, And then my most awful moment, I've had lots of awful moments, but the most awful moment was my family with another Bangladeshi family were coming back from the cinema. We watched Kramer versus Kramer, if anybody remembers that. I'm giving away my age now. But anyway, on the way back, we had to pass a group of skinheads, and they were nothing other than skinheads. There's no other label. There were racist skinheads, not scar skinheads, but racist skinheads. And they took upon us. We managed to get the rest of the family away, and they ended up coming into the house that I'm physically in. It wasn't our house at the time, but it was a good colleague's house here. And my father and I stayed behind. I had never seen my father fight, and I'd never fought myself. I wouldn't know how to. And all I can say is thank God for an Asian newsagent who left the bread baskets, those big bread baskets, the plastic ones with the handles. And I'm telling you, I've never seen my father like this. I've never been like this and never have been since. We picked up those bread baskets and swung for life, absolutely swung for life. There was no way anybody was going to hurt my father. And for him, there was no way anybody was going to hurt his daughter. And it must have gone on for 15 minutes. And then the police came because somebody had reported it. And that event is 200 yards away from where I am right now. So I have never, ever forgotten it. I see it every day because I go out every day. Sometimes I don't remember. And other times I can feel my ears, not ears, my eyes swell up. It's about 60 seconds, 90 seconds. And then I kind of go, that was 50 years ago, Shelley, or 40 years ago, you know, but it doesn't kind of disappear. So those events, and I have got lots of privileges, but I know there's lots of people who look like me, come from the same background as me, who don't have the privileges that I've got. And it's like, I'm showing up. I am just showing up. Yeah. So that's a little bit of my story.
Thank you, Shelley.
Mm.
Thank you. Vinay, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. They always say don't go last. How do you follow that? So I recognize elements of my story in both of what Shelley and Jazz have spoken about. And I count myself fortunate in some ways that some of the extremes that Shelley has described, I haven't experienced directly. I know others who have.
Mm.
So I think there is interesting where Jazz started with gaslighting, because I've often thought, is it racism? Is it not racism? What is it? Is it something else? And so I grew up in a family that emigrated from Kenya in 1967. My father came over here. The first time he saw somebody who was not of coloured skin doing manual labour was when he walked out of Heathrow Airport for the first time at 16, looked up and saw a man on a ladder and wondered why somebody with white skin was doing manual labour. That's the very first time in his life he saw that. Never seen that before in his life. So they set up in 1967, set up in Harrow in London, and then moved to the Midlands. He and his brother set up a family business. We had a greengrocers in Sparkbrook in Birmingham. So my early years and memories were, and there was a strong Indian community there, strong Asian community there, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Caribbean, Irish. You know, just there was a really strong immigrant population there. So I grew up in my early days surrounded by that. So maybe a bit oblivious to the world doesn't look like this everywhere, possibly. But I did grow up in Tyseley on a predominantly white street. I think there's probably just four of us that were of any colour. There was one black family, another Asian family, I think maybe one other that grew up in that area. So predominantly white school. I was one of a few Asian kids within that school. But I learned also to adapt. I was really good at blending in and being just hiding in the majority and not standing out as the minority. I don't think it was a deliberate thing, but I just think there was a programming and an adaptability that did that. I think my name, although it's pronounced Vinay, and I'll come back to why that's important in a second. When I was young, I was known as Vinny, and I accepted that that's what people called me, so that's what I accepted. And so it was Vinny. It sounded Western, so I guess I didn't have to go through we're just going to call you Jim, or we're just going to call you Bob, or we're just going to call you, any of those names. My dad's name was shortened to D. My mother, her name was Tara. Well, it's Tara, which is pronounced in Hindi, but her name here was spelt Tara, so she was known as Tara. So it was convenient and fitted in well. I do recognise the pattern early on of don't rock the boat, fit in, work hard. You're gonna have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Although I didn't then apply that into my education because I failed all my exams because I played far too much cricket and didn't revise enough. And although I was predicted to do well at school, I didn't do so well at school. So it was a bit of a wake up call that took my career in a different direction. Much to my mum's supportive yet disappointed look of this kid who was full of potential that didn't quite live up to the label. But I think throughout my career, that drive of wanting to prove myself and this need to feel validated that I belong, that I'm worthy, And what was really interesting is the more senior I got in the roles that I did, the more I felt that imposter syndrome come in to go, I do I belong here? Is somebody going to tap me on the shoulder in a minute and go, mate, you're in the wrong room, get out? But it started to manifest itself, and it wasn't until probably my mid 30s really that I got really comfortable with who I was. Like I've always been proud of my Asian culture. I was involved in my temple, my parents were, so I lived this double life of at home, really, really proud of Asian culture. My grandma didn't speak a word of English, we spoke the language at home. My mom taught the language as well. So there was this whole side of the world over here that when I went to work or when I went to school, there was a different side of just fitting in and not really talking about that too much. There were a couple of funny things. I think so when I was at primary school, one of the things we had to do in English was every Monday when you came back to school after the weekend, you had to write about your weekend. It was called, write your weekend news. And every Monday I'd write about a wedding or a party or an outing or something. And my teacher just thought I was lying all the time. It's like, there's no way you've been to this many weddings. How can you possibly go to? You haven't seen the size of my family. It's huge. So that was quite fun. That was quite funny. But I think my first recognition of racism was probably uh, secondary school, I think. And I remember being with my friends, and there was an Asian kid across the road, and they shouted the P word to him. And then they turned to me and looked at me and went, "Oh, not you. You're not like, you're one of us. You're not one of them." And I didn't say anything in that moment. I just accepted it and I went, "Oh yeah, I'm one of you." Not because I didn't want to be him, but these are my friends, and they were saying that I'm one of them. And that haunted me throughout my later teens and as I grew up, because I started reflecting on that moment and going, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I stand up for myself? Why didn't I stand up for that kid across the road who was me, and allowed them to say what they said? And then that had a sort of a domino effect, which, as I said, sort of came to pass in my mid 30s, where I matured a little bit, grew up, and really reclaimed my name and started to become bolder about correcting people when they say my name incorrectly, because it's not just a name. In my culture, you are given your name based upon your birth sign and how the stars align at the moment that you're born. It signifies something. There is a significance about that name. So the pronunciation, the meaning, they all have a role in life. So for me, that was one of the first things, reclaiming that's how my name is pronounced, and then really starting to kind of uncover this. Where is this thing about needing to be accepted and hiding this part of me from the rest of the world come from? And then I just started to share more and more of it. I became bolder, braver, talked more about it. I was unapologetically bringing out some more of my Indian heritage, challenging things that I saw, heard, and yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I'm no way an activist or any of the kind, the work that other people on this call doing that in that way, shape, or form. But um, I've certainly refound myself and rerouted myself into who I am, and I think that's just kind of spoken echoes about how I've gone about probably my life for the last probably 15 years now. I'm 51 now, so what, 15, 16 years? It's just been a transitional change. And I think that's been really important. I've got a 15-year-old daughter. It's been really important for her to role model that. She's grown up in a world where she can step out and be proud and be brown and have, there's a world where people openly now look at Bollywood, and it's not just, a load of funny people dancing on screen, but it appears everywhere. It's in everything. It's sampled in music in the charts. It appears in adverts on TV. It appears on, everywhere. When I was young, the only brown person we saw on TV was Madhu Jaffrey on BBC Two at probably about 9 o'clock, 9:30 after the main program, and that was the only person we grew up with. So we really lacked role models. But she's grown up in a world where there are role models, and I think it's important that she sees that her dad, her family, are proud of the heritage that they have, and hold on to that and allow that to come through in everything they do. So yeah, I think that's really, and I think if nothing more, and how it kind of bleeds into my work now, I guess, is that when we look at customer experience, when we look at and how organizations connect with customers. It's understanding those differences. It's understanding those different biases that we hold in the judgments that we make, in the designs that we create, in the products that we, develop, all of those kind of things. So it's the ability to be able to see things from multiple perspectives.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vinay. I was going to start with you for the next question, but maybe I'll give you a chance to have a rest of your voice brief. Maybe I'll go to Shelley next for the second question, which is all about, in terms of the experience of racism from a South Asian heritage perspective. Is there a fundamental difference, do you think? Is there something which is unique about experiencing racism from that perspective? And I mean, and if you can bring in any information from your area of expertise as well, that'll be helpful. But Shelley, can I turn to you? Is there something unique? It doesn't feel as if it's talked about quite so much, but you're on mute at the moment.
Done it again. So each of our experience would be different, and I suppose I want to speak from my lived experience and not put my story onto anybody else's, and there'll be similarities and differences. I feel a lot of the racism that comes towards my community or the Southeast Asian community can also be wrapped up with imagery from past literature and stereotyping, as is much of racism. I get that. And for me, it's linked into my religion and my food and things like that. Those nuances come out, etc. And, I just find it hilarious when, there are right-wing marches and they rock up to a kebab shop and you kind of go, really? Type thing, and just the kind of hilarity that I find in all of that, of whatever's taking place. So there's something about associated with religion, and I suppose I feel it more at this moment in our society because I am a Muslim, and everything that's going around with regards to Islamophobia, and I know there's also other anti-religious attacks taking place because of religion, but I speak specifically to the Islamophobia part. So that would be one thing. And I think for me, because I have the name Hussein, which is a very, very common Muslim name, and there's multiple spellings of it. I happen to have Hossain. So it's like they'll bring up Saddam Hussein. As soon as they bring up Saddam Hussein, the whole of, every Muslim country comes up as well. And it's like, I'm really sorry, but I can't carry the weight of the world on me just because of my name, etc. I mean, I'm surprised someone hasn't said, did you know Saddam Hussein? I mean, but it's like, yeah, of course, I know all of the Husseins. It's like knowing all of the Smiths or the Joneses or whatever it is, So there's that aspect of it. And I think the other aspect of it is that for me, I, far as I know, I have a very Western accent. I've lost my sort of Binglish accent, etc. And that has given me advantage. But there's something about the story that goes around for our communities of we're not willing to integrate, which is very different. We're not willing to assimilate. We're not willing to integrate. We always want to keep ourselves separate. And some of that is, I think, to do with us wanting to maintain our culture. But what people also forget is it's because of safety. When we venture out, the response we get is such, it's easier to retreat and to stay alive. And to stay alive, emotionally alive, spiritually alive, as well as physically alive, So in terms of OD, I have absolutely made it my mission, and those of you who've come on any of my contributions, I'm sort of become slightly obsessive about talking about understanding, tracking power and privilege, and politics, power, privilege, and politics. And that's not just because to me they're core OD capabilities, but it's because we will never shift society if our leaders in our organizations can't do this, And I know in public service, you have to write, well, in any service, you have to write policies, but I'm at the point of, can you stop doing policies and take some action, please.
Mm.
You know, so I'm absolutely in a space of high level support, high level challenge, but with a desire to create shift. Yeah, I just stop there.
Great, thanks, Shelley. Vinay, we'll go to you second this time. Same question.
Yeah, I think it's complex. So I really hear what Shelley said, particularly in the current climate around um, people of Muslim faith and the focus that's on that faith right now. And I think the first thing is when we group South Asians together, there's this group, but they're all very different as well. So you've got Hindu, you've got Sikh, you've got Muslim, you've got Buddhist, you've got all these different intersections in there, and they're all very slightly different. I mean, there is the racism within the South Asian community is one thing that should be called out. Let's not sit here and go in that we're not racist towards each other, because we can be, and you can see it often. Like, I think there are examples right now where certain individuals from certain sections are aligning themselves with the far right against a certain section of the South Asian community, because it's just easier to be on that side of the fence and in than it is on the other. People might find that offensive, but I just look at it and think, oh, what on earth are you doing? So I think it is complex. I think, you know, there's clearly the collective, the color of our skin is the thing that keeps us collectively in the same bucket. And so I think that's part of, like, to the outside where we're grouped together, but inside we're different from each other as well. So I think that's important to recognize and call out. I think we also see ourselves a bit differently as well. I think that the imprint of the empire is I think for the South Asian community is particularly huge. I know in the Afro-Caribbean community, and you had the Windrush generation, all of those things, have had the stamp of the British Empire. But I think, particularly as far as what happened, and the partition that was created between India and Pakistan, the line that was created, and all of those kind of things, I think that has had a significant impact on how we see ourselves, and then how we associate ourselves, not just with each other, but with the British. And I think there's also differences where you have come from to here. So people that have come directly from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh to the UK have a different mindset or a different experience of those that came via somewhere like Kenya, Uganda, another British port, and then have come here as well. So I think that also skews the way that we see ourselves, the way that we hold ourselves, the way that we show up. Yeah, so I think those are some of the differences that I see. I think ours is also deeply intertwined with religion, as well as color and faith. So that's an interest. That's an important thing to call out. Yeah, I don't know what else to add to what's already been said. It was said far more eloquently than I put it by Shelley. I think, but I think we have a responsibility to show up here in a way that we show up individually in our slice of the Asian community, the South Asian community, but also as the collective as well. I have a podcast, and my co-host is Muslim, and I constantly think about how must it feel right now to be Muslim in this world. Like, how must it feel to you to have the eyes of the world on you, and to be and I mean, look, like I outlined earlier, I've experienced some racism, but you just kind of, it's almost 10x to the level that you're constantly feeling those eyes of the world on you everywhere you go. I remember not long after 9/11, I travelled. I'm not Muslim, I'm of Hindu faith, but I remember being in the queue at the airport and being singled out to be searched with every other brown person that had a beard that looked remotely like me. We were all singled out, whereas the rest of the queue was allowed to go on. So those kind of experiences, they kind of live with you.
Thanks, Vinay. Jazz, same question to you.
I'm going to follow Vinay's rule in terms of I really don't like being last. I think as Vinay and Shelley were talking, the idea and concept of colorism really spoke out. And it takes many frames, whether you call it casteism, whether you call it colorism, whether you call it whatever. And then the truth of that concept is the closer to white you get, the better you are, whatever better looks like. So I think in terms of the question itself, your experience in terms of the South Asian heritage is different, I believe, because there is so much variation and experience within even one particular household. I remember my brother at the age of 4 scrubbing his skin in the bath, and he's going, just why can't I just want to be this color. I want to be this color on the palm of my hand. I don't want to be this color because I get bullied because I'm this color, but I can't be this color. And he's 4 years old. And it's almost like, from a personal experience, you don't fit one and you don't fit the other. You're stuck in this limbo in the middle. And even as I'm saying it, you'll notice I'm choosing my words really carefully, because I've been in that experience whereby you've been excluded from black groups because you're not black enough, and then you're excluded from the white groups because you're not white enough, and then you stood thinking, yeah, but okay, so where do we go? I mean, I've grown up significantly with Caribbean friends. I was never kind of Asian enough to go with the Asian crowd, and that then caused problems at home because it was perceived in a particular way. And this is my personal experience in terms of growing up in the outer edges of Derby and kind of trying to navigate that space. And then from a work experience perspective, you still experience it. So I would class myself as a senior leader in an organization which we've got over 50% senior leadership representation, and we're really proud of that. And when you hear some of the conversations within the senior leadership spaces, there is even an expectation that if you were born in the UK and you get to a particular level, and you're not born in the UK and you get to a particular level, actually you should be doing better than me because I'm not even born in the UK. So why haven't you got to? So there's this constant battle, and it feels like there's a colleague and dear friend of mine, Jagtar Singh, who has really supported me personally over the last years, well, since I really came into the NHS. And he talks about the divide within particularly racialized groups and the infighting, and how his belief is firmly that's racism at play. That whole divide and conquer concept is about splitting people up, it's creating those divides, and actually, and everybody knows, we are stronger together as a people, going to Shelley's point. So much so that we can see it tracking itself in terms of the data, in terms of the divides and the differentials. We can see race equity groups breaking up into Black groups, Asian groups, South Asian groups, East Asian groups. So actually there isn't a collective voice. And when you don't have a collective voice, there is less power, because now what you've got is fragments, right? And when those fragments don't necessarily speak to each other because they're all pipping for that £5,000 that you've got as a collective organisation to give to the networks, we can't do anything meaningful. And I'm using that as an anecdote. It's not an accurate anecdote. It's simply a made-up one. From a development and a data collection perspective, the most stark data we have, particularly within the NHS, is the overrepresentation of South Asian doctors, particularly to the GMC. Some might say, actually, that's because of the cohort and the grouping of doctors that we've got, and yet we still know that representation is still overrepresentative in terms of the referrals to the GMC. Now, a majority of those cases have no case to answer. From a South Asian perspective, a majority of those cases are from South Asian communities, usually from migrant doctors. So these doctors have left their home countries, they've come to serve us in the UK, and I say us because I'm born in the UK, Derby City Hospital, and it makes me not only sad, but it makes me angry, because as a leader within an organisation where this would happen, it feels like sometimes we we sometimes align ourselves to the policies and processes that are there that we should actually be deconstructing. And I'm quite grateful for the fact that I'm in an organisation where I've been really enabled to support that deconstruction, and we're not quite there yet. And yet, I speak to colleagues. I mean, there's a Neil's on the call who's been part of our National Patient Care Race Equality Framework work. In 2025, 2026, we're having conversations about race equality frameworks. Over the last 60 years, we've not been able to get to the bottom of why are our people getting disproportionately treated. And when I speak of our people, I mean racialized groups. The data hasn't moved a dial in a significant amount of time. And yet now we break ourselves off into subgroups before we've even kind of made any dints. And it doesn't necessarily answer our question, but what it does do, it gives us fragments to think about while we're all chasing that same slice of cake and aiming to get our own piece, actually what's happening to the bigger piece. And with allies like yourselves, Adrian, and the Aaron Network, where is it that we can take that voice to, and how can we really amplify the collective point? Because if we continue to divide and conquer, this is it's only going to get worse. There is hope in our generations to come, and yet we know the right wing is getting more right. So the risk is real, and that's where I then come back into myself a little bit. I've tried to frame that in as a politically correct context as possible, knowing that I'm here also as the AD of BSMHFT in a mental health organisation.
Yeah. Thanks, Jazz. I think looking at the third question I was going to ask you, I think I might just shelve that for now because I'd like to give a chance for people to ask questions while you're here. There'll be a chance for just broader discussion after the 9:30 kind of watershed when we turn the recording off. But if you do have any questions for our panel members, could you just indicate that either by putting your electronic hand up or putting something in the chat just to let us know? That would be really helpful. And while you're thinking of those questions, I just want to say thank you at this point to all three of you, because whenever we ask people who have experienced racism to share from their experience, we are potentially triggering some really painful memories, and I can just kind of feel that as you shared some of the depth of that pain. And so I'm just so grateful, and recognizing that it's costly for you to be here, and costly for you to share your stories. So we are incredibly grateful and humbled by your willingness to do so. That really helps us to open our eyes to things that we just don't see and don't experience. So thank you. So let's turn to the chat. Are there, James, I don't know whether you'd be able to keep an eye on the chat. Are there any questions that have been put there, or would anyone like to? I can see Amit's got his hand
Yeah,
up.
not any questions, just sort of statements of thanking. Or yeah, it's
Okay.
saying about.
Yeah. Amit, you've got your hand up. Should we go for Amit first then?
Thank you. Thank you for those contributions. And I was running a session today with emerging Black and Brown leaders, and we were speaking about a number of subjects around personal growth. And one of the things that hasn't changed through my journey through anti-racist Black perspectives, anti-oppressive practice work has been this thing around how we always seem to have to work twice as hard or three times as hard. And you'd mentioned it, Vinay, as well, in terms of, twice as hard, but for half the way. And I'm just trying to think around how we shift that narrative, because if we continue on with that narrative, and if that's a reality, we need to call out the reality. Or is it just become a sense of a mix of a reality or a self-fulfilling prophecy? Where are we at with this? Because we hear it continuously. And I remember hearing this as an immigrant to this country, and then, working with emerging Black and Brown leaders today, them all saying the same thing. And I think, what hasn't shifted here? And what do we need to do to kind of change that conversation for ourselves?
Yeah, so I mean, it was just a pondering element of my afternoon, and then it's been fascinating hearing these stories here today. But are we ever going to be able to change that?
Good question. Open to anyone who'd like to.
Can I chime in with
Yeah.
a couple of things just on that? So I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I look at it on one side of the fence, I look at it as it's actually served us quite well in some ways to have that ethic of having to work twice as hard. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I just think that I think in some ways it's driven success, progression, achievement in a group, but also at a cost of that feeling that you've just got to work that much harder, right? So I recognize both sides of the equation. Do I think it's ever going to disappear? Well, it's interesting when you have young people in your house. So a kind of a tenuous link, but when the flags first went up a few months ago around the place, like literally I saw them and they just brought back a flood of memories from my youth because the association, and it's not about the flag, it's just the association with the flag. You know, this has got nothing. If you want to wave the flag, it's absolutely fine, right? But it's the association that it has. And I remember talking to my daughter about it in the car and going, when you see that flag, what does it mean to you? Do you know, do you feel? And she was like, it's just a flag. What do you mean? What does it mean? And I went, well, does it? She has no association with what I have the association with the flag. The potential danger is we inadvertently create the association and reverse engineer it backwards, and then now there is one. But that's not to say we shouldn't talk about it because it's important to be able for them to understand the history and where it's come from. I just think there is that. So the reason I'm saying that is that if you speak to younger people now, would they have the same, I've got to work twice as hard to get half as far, or has the fact that we have shouldered they've got to work twice as hard to get half as far created a world of opportunity where there is still a way to go. No way are we there, but there is a bridge that's been built that it affords them a little bit more runway, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's making sense, but I just think I look at the world through her eyes, and I don't think. I mean, you just look at everywhere in the media, role models. I mean, if she looked at this call, she'd see three brown faces on there. She'd be like, there were three brown people talking on this call. You know, what's going on? But everywhere there are more role models and more ideas of what is possible than what we would have had. You know, I grew up when John Barnes was probably John Barnes, Viv Anderson, people like that were the early sports people that I saw. There's still nobody like me, and then it was cricket was the only place that I saw people that look like me, which is hence why I follow cricket a lot more because that's the place where I saw people that look like me. So yeah, I think that, yeah, that's kind of my view. Sorry, I hope that's made sense.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vinay.
Yeah.
I want to get a number of other questions in, but Shelley and Jazz, do you want to add anything briefly to what Vinay has said on that point?
So in terms of the question that came forward, I have a sadness inside me that says that, such a big shift is required, that, our struggle in this space, I feel, will continue for a couple more generations. And at the same time, I'm also in the same space as Vinay, where our next couple of generations would just call it out, say it as it is. They won't be as cautious as my parents were. And, had I chosen not to be an activist, my quiet little self would stay quiet and not say a word, but, and there are many occasions I stay quiet because the labor is too much or the risk is too much, So I might have the competence and capability, but in that moment, I don't have the courage. And I live
Right.
I don't have the courage 24/7 because it's becoming exhausting.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, I just feel we need to raise gobby next generation people. Yeah.
Thanks, Shelley. Jazz, anything briefly before we go to Savannah's question? Sorry, I mean we can't come back to you on that one. Just want to give other people a chance to ask. But Jazz, anything briefly to
Just
add?
a couple of considerations. I mean, it's probably an awareness and a consciousness of the data. So we know from a global majority perspective, there's an overrepresentation in the application of the positions of people in power and influence, particularly within the NHS. We know there's an overrepresentation of disciplinary grievances. We know there's an overrepresentation of unfair dismissals, and the kind of conversation goes on and on and on, and you can usually apply that to whatever sector. So having a consciousness to that data and the disproportionality from a particularly leadership perspective can be quite powerful in relation to responding to feedback, but also having the literacy in relation to cultural norms and particularly the just culture work that happens across various different areas. So an awareness too, rather than a deficit model, is something that I always advocate.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you,
Savannah,
Adrian.
you're welcome. Savannah, how do I unmute?
Hello. Thank you guys for sharing your experiences. It was really, it was really, really nice to hear. It's something that I've not really been exposed to. A question I have, we've spoken about the notion of we have to work harder or twice as hard, which is definitely something I heard as a child. I want to know what your perspective is in relation to tokenism. I know that in my generation, we often hear the notion of you've got this job because of the colour of your skin or because of your gender, because companies and organisations want to make sure they hit the quota mark. So I want to know what your perspective was from a South Asian experience in relation to the concept of tokenism and your thoughts on that.
Who'd like to take that one?
I'm happy to kick off. So thank you for that question, and I think it's one that we need to pay attention to all the way through. So I have, in my different jobs, had the opportunity to set up what might be classified as positive action initiatives. People coming back and saying, oh, it's only happening because you're on the positive action program. And, and then other times, I've been cornered in a lift to say, I don't even wear a skirt. But if I, to say someone, if I was wearing a skirt, I would have got that job. And I sort of say, well, you got it because you wear trousers. So how does that work then, in that sense of actually, yeah, you were appointed because of your color. It happens to be white. So I've got to the place of, because I'm not internal, so I have an advantage of being able to say things that nobody then comes back to me on. And I don't have to, sit next to the person I've just said it to. And I don't mean to say that rudely, but I've got myself to a place where I have that possibility. And I'm shaking inside when I say it. I am totally shaking inside when I say it. So do not imagine that, I've suddenly acquired this, thick shield or superpower, because I so have not. And what I actually want to do is slap someone, but the best I can do is have a go at them verbally. Yeah. Sorry, that's my truth. That's my truth. Not going to dress it up because I don't need to. Yeah.
Surely. Jess, yours.
Yeah, I think as Shelley was speaking, I was like, I wish I was a consultant so I could go and do that when anybody ever said that to me. So I believe it or not, I've had probably the comment in terms of either ethnicity or gender or both. It probably every time I've secured a new position for the last, anytime I got out of quite a junior role, and almost I've rehearsed this comment of, okay, work with me for 6 months, and if you still think that, then we'll have a conversation. If you're not conversed by then okay, then maybe you can offer me some development. So it's slipping on its head a little bit around, actually, if you think that is that bad, then we can work together on this. And that I've been given positive and developmental feedback in relation to that comment. And I think there is just something around being able to stand in your power. Okay, to Shelley's point, this has been happening for yonks, right? People have been tapped up no end, either for being mates, being part of the network. We've had various secret squirrel kind of recruitments. We know any public sector organisation, there's some in the local media right now. It's not something new. And now all of a sudden, when we're seeing a demographic shift in visibility, especially, so all of a sudden, when you see the visibility or the senior leadership visibility change, whether it be gender, whether it be ethnicity, whether it be intersectional, right, then people start asking questions. And having the narrative to be able to robustly respond to that or not, dependent on your emotional labor. And I think that's really important. Sometimes when we don't have enough, right, to give, we don't have to give. If someone chooses to stay with that thought, that's on them, right? And often I think that is a tool that is underutilized in terms of the power of silence, because it's a case of, oh no, we need to respond. That's on you. You go away with that. You stay with that. If you don't think I'm good enough, that's on you. So that's something that I've learned to practice over particularly the last 12 months or so. One, because I'm getting tired, and two, because sometimes I can't remember what to say.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Shelley, did you want to add something? You put your hand up just now.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, Savannah, the other thing is that I'm in a point in my career that lots of organizations ask me to go on their boards for XYZ. And I think inside me, I still have one more board position left inside me. I just haven't worked out what to say yes to. But one of the things I say very early on is I don't want to be your diversity poster girl. I say, I'll be your champion of OD because I know my OD stuff, okay? But if you're bringing me in because of my color or my gender, no, or my DNI expertise, I am an OD practitioner who knows hell of a lot about DNI, okay? So very, very clear, be clear about, and I've sort of said this needs to be clear with the whole board. This needs to be clear with the whole board. It's not just a conversation with the chief exec and the chair. So that's another way of us working not to be the token. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Shelley. I think we've got time for one more question before I come to the final question for the panel. Any other questions that are burning there? Do put your electronic hand up or show us in the chat. I can see Amit's got his hand up. Can I just double check that anyone else wants to go who hasn't had a chance yet? Okay, it seems not. Amit, back to you. What would you like to say?
Thank you. I did put it up hoping somebody else would and they could take that space. So, but I will certainly use it with the expertise we have in the room here right now. There was some research done around the level of acceptance in white dominant environments, leadership environments, where the level of assimilation of black and brown people is higher. And that's another thing which I kind of have to contend with the work that I do and the questions I get asked in this space. So, often we can find that the levels of representation at senior levels where there is more power, because we all know this is about power, is there. However, the level of assimilation is also there as well. So therefore, you have to kind of play almost, the white card or the white game and behave, be like the dominant culture to receive that level of acceptance. And therefore that level of acceptance of, presenting yourself as more white, but you've got brown skin, supports two things. One, it gives them the representation. Two, it may give a black or brown person progression, but at the cost of the sellout of identity, of culture and authenticity. So I just thought I'd throw that in to say that, having lectured at the University of Essex on this subject, this came up quite a bit around, we see, even when we see the representation, it's so assimilated that we can't notice the difference then in terms of, is it just the color representation or is it the cultural as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Amit. I think it was I'm not sure there's a question, more of a comment, was it? Or did anyone
just reflection, if anybody has kind of got any thoughts on that from the panel?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I mean, I think, the more senior, I've seen so many people of brown and black skin, the more senior they become, there's almost you then become conform to a certain way of being.
Yeah.
At that level, right? Whether it's unconscious, whether it's an unconscious thing because collectively you're surrounded by people that behave a certain way, so you pick up their mannerisms and behaviors, or whether it's a conscious thing, I don't know, and I don't think we've got enough time to debate that. But I certainly do see that. I recognize it in I recognized it in myself. The more senior I got, that there was this kind of like, I'm here now, don't rock the boat, just try and fit in, right? And then there's a bit of me that was starting to go, well, no, you're here because you're bloody good at what you do.
Right.
So you know, you need to speak about the things you need to speak about. And there were a couple of things that happened. So I've always been one for titles don't mean anything to me really that much. I don't, you know, I'm just another person with a different title, a different set of experience. I just happen to be at that level in the organization, right? But I remember when I was at one of my former employers, there was a lot of diversity on the front line, and then when it got to about middle management, it stopped, and then it became whiter and whiter the further up you went, and even from a gender perspective, it became more and more male, right? It wasn't just about race. But it was when I started to go around and speak to some of the people on the front line and speak to some of the Asian people I met, and they would look at me and go, because you're up there, that means it's possible for us now. And I found that a really heavy thing to wear on my shoulders. It started to creep into my behavior as I was always responsible. I was the representative, and I had to carry myself a certain way. And that burden of, like, if I'm not here, then what happens to them? But it was a real, like, I can't explain fully or articulate clearly what it felt like, but it just that burden of somebody saying, because you're up there, that's, you know, you're up there, you're representing us, kind of thing. And it's a really heavy thing. And I don't think if you're not of a coloured skin that you have the same weight on your shoulders to carry. I mean, even like while I'm talking about that, even broader than that. I mean, there were times where if I saw litter on the floor, I'd pick it up and put it in the bin because I didn't want anyone thinking that was me that dropped it, and therefore all Asian people drop litter on the floor. Or there is a way of behaving and carrying your character because you're representing the crew. People are judging everyone that looks by me by my actions and my behavior.
Wow.
And I just, I found that a really heavy thing to carry. Really, yeah. So I resonate with what you say there for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz, for your comments as well. That's
Anything else from the panel before I move on to the last question?
On the contribution from Vinay, just building other nuances. So there's the aspect of assimilation, and I think assimilation can be painful and superficial. That we wear a mask in order to assimilate, but then behind the scenes there's a whole load of other stuff going on where we are trying to hold on to our authenticity, etc. So it's like it's a survival mechanism from where I am. Not for everybody, but from my experience. And then on a more positive spin, one of the things that I think we are absolutely ace at when we're not from the dominant group is that our bicultural competence is beyond awesome.
yes.
At a negative level, you could say we're constantly code switching, and I get that because I hold that through as well. But at another level, listen, I can eat herring with my hands and not get a single bone in my mouth, okay? And my English etiquette is beyond extraordinary because I went to one of those schools where we were taught etiquette, etc. So it's that sense of, do I do it good both ways? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love that.
And Jazz, I noticed you put something in the chat there. Do you want to kind of speak that out before we move on?
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute. It was really interesting listening to Vinay's experience of the heaviness. Whereas I think for me, it's always, I don't know why, but it feels like quite an amazing thing to be able to do in terms of, so I've got 3 girls at home, 22, 20 and 12, and also within workforce or within areas where people see that representation, especially coming from a working class family and your life experiences growing up, that whole idea of, hold on a minute, if she can talk like that and she can make it, then I can talk like that and I can still make it. And that narrative, so although it is a heavy burden, I think being able to step into that vulnerability of, my God, I won't get it right. And when I don't get it right, I'll be the first one to hold my hands up and say, you know what, I cocked up and it's not the right thing for me to do. And I'm really, really sorry. And standing beautifully in the essence of our cultures, which has always said, whether it be whatever religion you kind of fall into, that duty of candor type of approach, whereby you are always true to yourself and you are true to your people. I think that's something that really helps in terms of being able to carry that power and saying, okay, I won't get it right all the time, but I'll be able to show you how we can get it right enough. And then when we don't get it right, we can learn together and grow together, because actually I might not have all the answers. And that's one thing that I think is missing from some of our conversation, is this sense of community whereby it's been broken down historically, and we feel like we've got to work through this Eurocentric way of, oh, being the greatest person I can and do it on my own. Well, actually, we know you can't do it on your own. We're no, what do they say? It takes a village to bring up a child, right?
Mm.
So there's just something about the essence of our cultures that I think, if we can stand and show that vulnerability, actually being that role model, being the only person at the table, can be really powerful.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
That beautifully leads us into our final question, in a sense, because we don't want you to stand alone. This is why this network is set up. And so, what advice could you give us for each panel member? If you can, it has to be relatively brief because of the time of the evening. But what advice could you give us for those of us who aspire to be better allies against racism? It might be generic advice that might apply to anyone, but specifically coming from the South Asian heritage perspective, how can we be better allies against racism with you?
I think the two words that come to my mind are curiosity and courageousness. So keep being curious. I think in your setup earlier on about being, sometimes we get worried about the clumsiness of language and inadvertently offending somebody. And I think if you stay curious, at some point you're going to offend somebody by saying something you didn't mean to say. Like, it's going to happen. If you're not, then you're probably not trying hard enough. So I think being curious and being willing to stand on that side and see the world from a different perspective is one. And I think courageousness is, I think having allies enables courage within us, but also the courage within you as allies to speak up when you see something, when you recognize a pattern. Like, if you see that, I don't know, heaviness coming through in somebody, the way they carry themselves, or even where you see somebody who's behaved a certain way, then suddenly they get to a position in an organization, suddenly they switch behavior because there's almost a sense of conforming. I think the permission to go, hey, it's okay, just be yourself, be you, do you. I think those two things are what immediately came to mind. I don't know if I've articulated them well enough, but I think those were two words that really came up for me.
Thanks, Vinay. Chaz, do you want to go next?
Yeah. It's quite a personal one in terms of notice when colleagues do something well that isn't noticed elsewhere, and also when provide feedback. So to Savannah, Savannah's left, but she's put a really important point in the chat around the heaviness of kind of not wanting to mess up. And actually, we're all human, we all mess up, right? And the narrative that I've always been told is, Jazz, if you mess up, the light's gonna shine 10 times brighter on you messing up than your white colleague any time of day. So actually, for me, I found great power in those allies being around me when I do mess up and supporting me in terms of moving through that. Because it won't be the first time, it won't be the last time, and then tomorrow is still tomorrow. So from a personal perspective, that's been really, really powerful. That consistent support and that consistent, you know what, I got you. And I really have got you. So that's something that everybody can do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jess. Shelley.
Yeah, it really builds and in the same thread as Vinay and Jazz. I think my words would be show care, create belonging, and be kind. And that goes towards everybody. But if we know how to do that, I think lots of people think they're kind, but they're actually not in their action. You know? So what does kind as a verb mean? To do kindness.
Yeah.
you know, then, and that I do mean that to all, you know, it might be doctor, patient, teacher, pupil, you know, brown to brown, brown to white, white to brown, you know, elder to younger. There's just something about, we have this word, it's in many of our faiths, but the practice of it is a bit wobbly, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Shelley. Really appreciate it. And thank you again to all three of you for this evening. It's been a rich conversation, and I really appreciate your part in that. Just to finish off the session this evening, the rest of our 2026 program looks like this. Next time in April, we're looking at decolonizing Christianity. In what ways has the church moved away from its Middle Eastern and African origins? What might we have lost? And one of our Council of Reference, Neil Charlton, who's done a number of sessions for us in the past, will be leading us on that. I believe that was part of his thesis for his theology degree a number of years ago. So that'll be really helpful to hear from him. And then 8th of July, Decolonisation Part 5 of Fair Cop, Decolonising Our Police and Justice Systems. Countless reports over 30 to 40 years have called for change. How can real change be achieved? And I'm after different panel members at the moment. I've got a number of people I'm thinking of bringing into that, both from the justice system and also from the police. So that'll be confirmed in due course, 8th of July. Wednesday, the 14th of October, we're getting very practical here. Angela, one of our steering group, is going to lead us in a session on effective anti-racism allyship, learning from past anti-racism action and examples of effective allyship. What did they do that made a difference, and what can we learn from them? That's going to be in October. So that's the rest of our program in 2026. All meetings will be on Zoom at 8 to 9:30 p.m. Those will be all BST, won't they? British Standard Time. If you're elsewhere in the world, that's the kind of marker for us. And just to remind people of the resource board that we now have over 400 resources, links to articles, spoken word, videos, all kinds of stuff on there. I think there's about 22 different categories there. You'll see that's all available free of charge if you register on our website. So do make use of that if you possibly can. And yeah, so just do sign up if you're not a member already at Anti-Racism Allies.net to be kept in touch with future sessions, and do put that 29th of April in your diary. And we're going to stop recording now, and do stick around if you can. But for those that need to leave, it's been great to have you with us, and hopefully we'll see you next time.